In this box are some coloured pencils that claim to be the best coloured pencils for beginners, and today I'm going to be running them through a series of tests and then using them on an actual drawing to see if this claim is actually true. And these pencils are the Ohuhu Halawa pencils. Now, when it comes to being a beginner-friendly pencil, you really want to be affordable for those who are just starting to dabble their toes in coloured pencil work. So how much is this set of 72 pencils? If you were to get them off the official Ohuhu website, it would cost you £37, which is around 49 US dollars. And this comes out to be about 51p per pencil, or 68 cents if you're in the US. Now, if you've never shopped for coloured pencils before, this is actually an extremely cheap price, and just to prove just how cheap it is, polychromos are another coloured pencil that I use, and for a 72 set of them, it's going to cost you £170 or $224 for the set, which is basically 4 times as much as the Halawa pencils. And if you want to go even more extreme to the Caran d'Ache Luminance pencils, which are pretty much the most expensive pencils you can get, you're looking at a whopping £224 for a 72 set, or 295 US dollars. So pretty much 6 times more than the Halawa pencils. So these things are definitely affordable for beginners. Right, so let's actually take a look at what we have here. So we've got this nice metal tin, but the very first thing that's jumping out at me is the fact that the artwork on the front, if you look a bit closer, is actually very grainy, and I'm not sure this is probably the best demonstration of what the pencils can do, because I'm assuming they've done this artwork onto sketching paper, which has made it grainy, and surely you want to do it on some smoother paper so you get more of a solid result. But hey, I mean, the colours are pretty vibrant here, and we'll just let this slide for the time being. So at the bottom we've got some information about them as well. So we've got that they're light fast and waterproof. So the light fast bits referring to the fact that they're resistant to being faded by light, and I'm not quite sure what the waterproof purpose is, because surely if you get water onto your drawing, then it's just going to destroy the paper, not the pencils. But I mean, sure, it's great that they're waterproof, and we've got richly saturated pigments, which will allow us to get those really nice vibrant colors like we can see in the drawing here. These soft and thick leads. Now, in terms of softness, because these are an oil-based pencil, I'm not quite sure how soft they'll actually be, because it's actually the more wax-based pencils that have these softer leads. So it'll be interesting to see that in the testing a bit later. And the eco-friendly natural basswood. I've heard that basswood is actually quite good at being sharpened, so hopefully these pencils will be able to get sharpened really well, and easily blending, which not necessarily the correct English there, so easy blending and colouring for artists, which is good to know, because obviously when it comes to doing realistic drawings, especially in the one a bit later, we're going to be doing a lot of blending. And on the back here you can see all the different colours that we have in this set. And I reckon without much more to say about the actual outer casing, it's time to open these things up. Right, so here they are. They definitely have that new pencil smell, and we obviously have our user manual. Says, thanks for choosing the Ohuhu oil-based pencils. Please read this user manual carefully before use and keep for future reference. And I mean, yeah, no, we're not doing that. Get out of here. And then we've got our color swatch sheet. So what you can do is you can fill this in using the colors that we have here, and then you can look at, let's say, the reference photo that you're working from and just determine which of the colors you're going to be using on your drawing. But I don't necessarily like to do this. I just kind of wing it. So I'm going to put this to one side as well. So let's actually have a look at the pencils. So just grabbing out this pink. And honestly, they feel pretty heavy in your hand. They've got some mass to them. They're quite thick as well. And I'm a bit concerned that they said that they were already pre-sharpened in the case, but that isn't very sharp. I think Ohuhu and I have very different views on what a sharp pencil actually looks like. And you can see here that the bottom is actually covered up as well, which means it's more resistant to breakages if I do drop it on the floor. Right, so let's just put this one back and just look at the other layer. So you got this plastic layer, which we can just pull out and push this over here. And look at all of these colors. So I could honestly jibber jabber about some other stuff, but I reckon the best thing we could do is just jump straight into the testing. So I'm going to be putting these pencils through 3 different tests. The first one being a sharpening test, because obviously they need to be sharpened. And then after I've done all these tests, I'll move on to doing an actual drawing. So in order to do a sharpening test, I'm going to be using 2 different sharpeners. So I've got my nice handheld one with a crank at the back, and then I've got my standard metal one that you pretty much can find anywhere. So I'm going to start off with the standard one and see what this does. But just spitting this, it seems to be doing something. I tell you what, that is sharpening like an absolute dream. Uh-oh, I spoke too soon. Not good. Let's keep going. I'm not sure about this one. I think it might be the sharpener's fault. I'll try the handheld crank one and see if that does any better. Oh, Okay, I think it was the crappy sharpness fault. And I'm gonna say that's passed the sharpening test despite my rubbish attempt with the metal one. Right, so test number 2 is a simple vibrancy test. And what I'm gonna be doing here is gradually increasing the pressure with the pencil in order to try and get a really nice solid and saturated result to really assess just how vibrant the color of this pigment really is. So starting off with this nice cerulean blue, I'm just gonna come in over here, pressing lightly at first. Oh my, this is actually feeling very similar to some of the really expensive pencils. Honestly, this is filling all those paper fibers really well. But something I'm starting to notice is it's becoming rather blotchy now. But again, I have done quite a few layers there, so it is expected. Honestly, that is actually pretty good. So coming in with that red that we just sharpened in the previous test, doing the exact same thing. Again, pretty good. And finally, just coming in with a yellow. And I think you can see just from this that these Halawa pencils are actually very vibrant. Right, so the third test I'm going to be doing with these pencils is actually a simple blending test where I'm going to create a gradient between these 4 different greens. So starting off with the darkest green, just in the left-hand side here. So starting off pressing really quite hard and then easing off the pressure as I'm coming further to the right, and then shifting over to a slightly lighter green, and then starting halfway in this left box, and again coming in. And onto the next green. And the final green. I then went back in with each of the greens to bring up the color saturation and just blend it a bit more. So you can see here that the transition between all those different colors is actually really smooth, so they've obviously blended together really well, and I'm actually really excited to use these on an actual drawing next. I'm going to be drawing a parrot for 2 reasons. A is because I want to try and use as many of the colors from this set as possible, and B is because if these colored pencils do a good job at drawing a bird, they can pretty much draw anything. Now I want to start off by saying that these pencils genuinely surprised me with how well they did, but before I get into all the good things about them, I just want to walk you through a couple of the downsides that I found, and the first one is the fact that they did struggle to layer. What was happening is I was adding in some details, and then when I came in with some more pigment, that pigment very quickly became blotchy and just didn't blend as well as I would have liked it to. Now, this is partially my fault as I did do this drawing onto very smooth paper, so that pigment didn't necessarily have a lot to grip onto in the first place. However, I have used other pencils on this paper and they haven't suffered as badly as what these Halawa pencils did. And the way that I got around it on this drawing is I basically just worked in fewer layers, and that seemed to work pretty well. Now, the next downside I want to talk about is with the color selection. Now, we're given a load of grays, but they're basically all warm grays, and you also don't have a gray that is dark enough to blend between that black pencil and like an intermediary gray. In fact, in the entire set, we don't really have a pencil that's anywhere near as dark as the black pencil, so it's quite hard to blend between those really, really dark shadows that you do with the black pencil and the more intermediary tones on the piece. However, I do think Ohuhu's probably going to fix this very soon, because just like their marker sets where they have like massive 350 sets, they're probably going to come out with some much bigger sets of these pencils very soon, which will most likely fix the issue that I'm talking about now. Now, the final downside that I want to talk about is the fact that after every time that I sharpen these pencils, and I do want to point out that they sharpen pretty well throughout the entire process, but when I came back in with that sharp pencil into the drawing and then I applied just a little bit of pressure, that very, very sharp point of the pencil basically just immediately broke. Now, this wasn't like a catastrophic break where I couldn't use it and had to sharpen it again. It was just a slightly annoying break where it just took off that really, really sharp point that's really useful for those finer details, and it was most likely down to me just being very heavy-handed, but it was slightly annoying. Right, so that's me done completely slating these pencils, so it's now time to move into the good things, and the first one that you're most likely noticing is the vibrancy of the colors, and it's just super intense. It feels like illegal to be able to create drawings as vibrant as this with such cheap colored pencils, and a bit later I'm going to be putting this drawing side by side with a drawing that I did with the Caran d'Ache Luminance pencils, so those really expensive ones that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, just to prove how vibrant the colors of these cheap pencils are compared to those really expensive ones. And the next benefit of these pencils is the fact that the pigment is actually very opaque, which is allowing me to create those really vibrant colors because it's stopping that white paper showing through the pigment layer, so I'm able to create those really vibrant colors. And something that I want to kind of re-mention is the fact that they do sharpen really well, which you just never find on cheap colored pencils because they always make them with really crappy binders and they just always break in the sharpeners. But here they only broke in the sharpener like 2 or 3 times out of the hundreds of times that I sharpen these pencils. pencils. And another thing I want to mention about these pencils is that they are ridiculously well built. They feel in your hand like a luxurious pencil, like I'm holding like a Polychromos or a Luminance pencil. But hey, they're like a 50p pencil, which is just insane. What I found as well is that the white pencil in the set is actually usable, because normally in the cheap colored pencil sets, that white pencil is just completely useless and you may as well just throw it away. However, here, you could still use it on top of intermediary colors to add in highlights. I mean, if you've got a dark color and you wanted to add in highlights, you're pretty much screwed because you've got that layering problem, which I mentioned whilst mentioning the problems. But here, if you've got an intermediary color that you want to add a highlight on top of, you could still do that with the white pencil. So unlike the feathers, I was still able to add those little highlighty, flicky feathers, helping to give it that illusion of texture. And I also want to mention that on the body of each of the pencils, it says conforms to ASTM D4236. And I did some research and it turns out this is basically stating that these pencils don't contain anything harmful or dangerous. And I haven't actually seen this on any other pencil brand. So it got me thinking, do they contain anything harmful or toxic? I don't know. But at least with these Halawa pencils, we know that if we accidentally eat them, we will not die. So are these the best colored pencils for beginners? And honestly, yeah. For the price that they are and the drawing I've been able to create with them, I would honestly recommend them to anybody wanting to start using colored pencils. And if you'd like to try them for yourself, I'll have them linked down below, and you can use the code that's appeared on screen to get 10% off your pencils. So as promised, here is the Parrot done with the cheap Halawa pencils and the one done with the expensive Caran d'Ache Luminance pencils. And I hope you see that the cheap ones have definitely held up a good fight against them. I mean, yes, the colors here are a lot deeper, richer, and the blending is a lot smoother. But at the end of the day, the pencils here are 6 times more expensive than these ones. So if you are a beginner, I'd highly recommend checking out these Halawa pencils. And if you have enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next one, which will appear on screen right over here.